Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you for joining today's live stream. As always, every week, I really appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch these videos. I do try to put as much effort into these as much as possible because I do find a lot of value in these streams, and I do think that it is helpful in so many different ways, no matter what you are doing in your fitness journey. I believe that these streams will be very beneficial to you in any area of your journey. So, thank you so much for taking the time to watch these. If you do have any questions or want to learn a little bit more information on what I offer with online fitness coaching, you can visit my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. So, if you have any sort of questions or want to know any information in regards to my online fitness program, you can go there. You can sign up for my email newsletter. You can also schedule your consultation through there, and you can watch the latest live stream that I did last week on the website as well. So I try to update that website as much as possible to give you up-to-date information on what I provide with my online fitness coaching. So I hope that you find that helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So what I'm going to talk about today is going to be in regards to carbohydrates. Now, with this, I'm sort of expanding upon the topic of sort of what I've been talking about over the past few weeks and over the month of January, sort of going over the basics of fitness and nutrition. And what I've been talking about here recently is focusing on macronutrients, which is known as proteins, carbs, and fats. So today we're going to sort of zero in on carbs and what exactly carbs are, how you can define what they are, and the foods that you should focus on when it comes to carbohydrates in your diet, especially when you are working towards a fitness goal. So the first thing to discuss, or the things that we are going to discuss, and the first thing will be, of course, defining carbohydrates, but there's different topics that we're going to be going over in this stream. So the first thing, of course, is defining carbohydrates. We're going to discuss a little bit about the chemical structure of carbohydrates, not too much into detail, but to give you an idea of how carbohydrates are sort of composed, what they are composed of, I guess I should say. We're going to discuss the type of carbohydrates, the sources of carbohydrates, as well as carbohydrates and how they relate to your health. So this is all what we're going to talk about today. Again, with these, I try to make these topics really understandable because a lot of terms sort of get thrown around, a lot of nutrition-based terms get sort of thrown around. It can be sort of confusing to understand, but what I try to do is sort of eliminate sort of that confusion and go over exactly sort of what we're talking about and explain it in detail, but in a clear and concise way. So defining carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are organic compounds made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. They are one of the three main macronutrients alongside fats and proteins. Carbohydrates serve as a primary source of energy for the body, playing a crucial role in various physiological processes. The basic building blocks of carbohydrates are sugar molecules, and they can be classified into two main types, which is a simple carbohydrate as well as a complex carbohydrate. So in simple terms, that's basically what a carbohydrate is. It is sugar molecules that are classified in two types. It's very simple. Just think of, carbohydrates as being two distinct different groups. And again, the carbohydrates is under the same umbrella as macronutrients because we consume a lot of that specific nutrient. So the chemical structure of carbohydrates is characterized by the presence of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. The basic building blocks of carbohydrates are simple sugars, and these sugars can exist as monosaccharides, disaccharides, or polysaccharides. So monosaccharides are the simplest form of carbohydrates and can be further hydrolyzed into smaller units. They consist of single sugar molecules. Disaccharides are formed with two monosaccharide molecules are joined through a condensation reaction, creating a glycolic bond, and polysaccharides are large macromolecules composed of multiple monosaccharide units linked together through glycolic bonds. So again, I know this is a lot of terms, but what you need to realize is that there are different sort of structures when it comes to carbohydrates. And just think of it in the basic terms of talking about carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So these are the basic building blocks of what a carbohydrate is, and they can be described by, being a simple form, a large form, as well as two sort of forms joined together. So that's what you would think of as mono. It's the simplest carbohydrate. Disaccharides is when two of the monosaccharides are combined, that creates that. And then the polysaccharides are a group of the simplest form of carbohydrates together. So I won't go into too far into detail, but I just want to give you the structure of what a carbohydrate is. So from here, we're going to sort of discuss a little bit about, going into relation to sort of our diet and the foods that we eat. So there's different types of carbohydrates. This can include starch, which is a polysaccharide, which is what we just discussed. It's found in plants, serving as a storage form of energy. It consists of glucose units linked in a linear or branch structure. Glycogen, the animal equivalent of starch stored in the liver and in the muscles, is highly branched and serves as a readily available source of glucose for energy. Cellulose, a structural polysaccharide in the cell walls of plants. It consists of glucose units linked in linear fashion and provides rigidity to plant cell walls. Chitin, found in the exoskeleton of arthropods, which is insects, in the cell walls of fungi, is composed of modified glucose units. So again, I know this is a lot of terms, but let's just focus on, going over, sort of these basic building blocks when it comes to carbohydrates. Another thing is dietary fibers, which include both soluble and insoluble forms of carbohydrates that resist digestion in the human small intestine. Fiber is found in plant-based foods and contributes to digestive health. So these are some of the different types of carbohydrates. And mainly what we're going to be talking about when it comes to carbohydrates is starch, glycogen, as well as dietary fiber. So the sources of carbohydrates can range and are found in a variety of foods, and they can be classified into different sources based on their composition. Fruits are rich in natural sugars, mainly fructose. They provide not only carbohydrates, but also essential vitamins, minerals, and dietary fiber. Examples can include apples, bananas, berries, oranges, and grapes. So that is an example of the carbohydrates that you should intake, which I'll talk further about, but that is an example of a complex carb. So grains are a major source of complex carbs in the form of starch. Whole grains also provide fiber, vitamins, minerals. An example would be rice, wheat, oats, quinoa, barley, and whole grain bread. Let's make sure that was barley. I'm pretty sure I figured that was. Vegetables are excellent sources of carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. They contain a mix of simple and complex carbohydrates. Examples can include leafy greens, carrots, broccoli, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. So these are basically all great examples of complex carbs. Any sort of, grains. And when you're focusing on grains, you do want to focus on whole grain based foods. You don't want to focus too much on, a lot of, dough, a lot of anything of that sort you kind of want to avoid. And then when it comes to fruits and vegetables, it's pretty much self-explanatory. You've got apples, bananas, berries. You've got any sort of greens, carrots, broccolis, potatoes, sweet potatoes are all great forms of carbohydrates that you should intake in your diet. And this can be related to any type of goal, any sort of nutrition goal that you're focusing on. So healthy carbohydrate choices, which is sort of what I just discussed, we're going to sort of go back over that again. You want to opt for whole grain like brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat. Again, any sort of whole grains. Brown rice is what you want to focus on when you're, consuming any sort of rice. When it comes to, fruits and vegetables, you just want to consume a variety of those, which we just discussed. Apples, anything of that sort, grapes, you've got bananas, any sort of complex carb is a great option. So you also can choose legumes, which is beans and lentils, for additional fiber and protein. So these are all basically a well-rounded group of carbohydrates that you should intake and are great for your diet. So some other considerations to keep in mind is you want to limit added sugars. So reduce the intake of added sugars found in processed food, sugary beverages, and sweets. A lot of bad carbs can come from these sorts of foods. So you just want to avoid those. And that's likely simple carbs that are going to be in those types of foods. Individual needs. So you need to, of course, have the ideal carbohydrate intake in mind. So it can vary based on individual factors such as age, activity level, and overall health. So you want to put certain factors in mind when you're sort of discussing, or not discussing, but you're, deciding what types of carbohydrates that you want to, focus on, and how much your intake should be based on your particular nutrition and fitness-based goals. And one thing I do want to keep in mind when it comes to carbohydrates is that a lot of times it is seen as a bad sort of food. Again, when we're talking about, it's not necessarily a bad food. It's just you have to learn how to have moderation with certain types of carbohydrates and focus on consuming more of the complex carbs, which is your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, legumes, anything of that sort you want to focus on in your diet. Those are all the good carbs. And just knowing sort of the balance of, what you're consuming is really important. Even if you do have, bad carbs in your diet, it's not going to be, detrimental to your progress. You just have to learn to have moderation with what you eat, basically. So just keep that in mind, that just focus primarily on those complex carbs. And that's what I always mention to my clients is the complex carbs are really the good carbs that you need to focus on. Don't, try to avoid the simple carbs, try to avoid a lot of the processed stuff, anything of that sort. And then when we're focusing on, sort of pastry sort of foods and breads, of course, we want to focus on the whole grains. We don't want to just take any sort of type of bread or wheat-based product, any kind, because there can be a lot of bad, carbohydrates in those types of foods. So we just want to focus on what is whole grain. We want to focus on brown rice, anything of that sort when we're talking about, when we're consuming those wheats or rices, basically. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions about anything I discussed, feel free to reach out to me. I do have my phone and my email here on screen. Again, you can visit my website, which is bponlinefitness.com, to learn a little bit more about my online fitness coaching. If you have any questions about anything that I discuss in this live stream or in previous streams, I'll be willing to answer those questions if you have them. But again, guys, I try to make this stuff, sort of understandable. I know there's a lot of terms that I sort of gave you guys, but really what you need to understand is you need to focus on, those complex carbs. That's really all you need to focus on with your diet. Now, another thing too is that you do need to have a well-rounded diet. Of course, you don't want to just intake complex carbs. You do want to have other foods such as healthy fats and then protein in your diet as well. So you do want to have a well-rounded and balanced diet. So keep that in mind as well. What I'm basically just telling you is recommending that you focus on those particular types of carbs when you are intaking those in your diet. So just keep that in mind. Again, this can be beneficial for, any particular goal, whether you're focusing on muscle gain or sort of fat loss. that can be beneficial to focus on those particular carbs. So thank you guys again for taking the time to watch these. I do have another live stream coming up next week where I'm going to talk about vitamins, talk about different types of vitamins, what is basically classified as a vitamin, and if they are beneficial for you and your particular goals that you're focusing on. So again, I'm going to sort of go a little bit further into the basics, and that's why I wanted to discuss these topics sort of separately in their own sort of way to help you understand exactly what these are. So thank you guys for taking the time again, and I will see you guys next Wednesday in the next live stream where I'll be talking about vitamins. Again, if you have any questions, reach out. But thank you guys again, and I'll see you guys in the next stream.